If there's one bird species that exemplifies Australia's vibrant variety of avians, it's this one, the rainbow lorikeet. These parrots might look like a slice of fairy bread with the personality of a golden retriever, but there's a darker side to these sweetie pies. That friendly facade hides an insatiable thirst for chaos. I already know you've spotted a lorry before, but I'm aware that some of you might be from places that aren't God's country. Well, their polychromatic plumage is a dead giveaway. And get this, they're lorikeets, but they're rainbow. Whoa, mind blown yet? Glad we're all learning here. A large percentage of their body is draped in green feathers, which, believe it or not, is used to camouflage among the trees. While their customer-facing parts are a symphony, no, that's too pretentious, a string quartet of reds, yellows, and blues used to communicate with other lorikeets. They're probably not as spectacular if you're colorblind. Sorry God forgot to install the latest Nvidia drivers in your eyes. I also know you've seen one because lorries are Australia's most spotted bird. There may be as many as 20 million of them in the wild. More rainbows than a pride parade on acid. It wasn't always this way. In Sydney during the 1950s, these birds were rarer than an esche with a valid train ticket. In Canberra in the 80s, they didn't exist at all. So what changed? Well, this. Prior to the 60s, Australia's urban planners had preferred to use European trees to line the streets of the capital cities. But suddenly, there was a shift towards planting natives. Eucalypts take a couple of decades to really get going, so by the 90s, suburbs had become blanketed in large native flowering trees. And the lorries took notice. It wasn't long before their numbers entered the stratosphere. Lorries are parrots, and belong to the tribe Lorini, aka the Lorikeets. They're joined by a whole host of colourful relatives, including another common native bird, the musk lorikeet. In fact, rainbow lorries in Tassie have been getting down and dirty with the musk lorries, resulting in a hybrid species. That one looks pretty. This one looks like a botched Warhammer paint job. These sky-high tie-dyes are predominantly seen in pairs, but will travel as a flock from time to time before pairing off again. Lorries are quite aggressive towards other birds. They'll defend their nests against the likes of the noisy miner and the wattlebird. But astoundingly, they'll even go talon to talon with larger birds like the magpie. Lorries also tend to take the offensive and grief the heck out of smaller birds, stealing hollows and even stooping to spawn killing their chicks in the nest. Nectar's one hell of a drug. Males and females are extremely low in sexual dimorphism. There's no known way of telling the difference without a qualified vet checking the status of their chaos emeralds. When it comes to nesting, they prefer the hollows of eucalyptus trees, which they make homely with chewed up pulp. Those hollows are often in short supply. Given the deficit, any hole's a goal, and some lorries have turned to using alternative nesting sites like this storm drain, a one-bedroom unit with waterboarding facilities. No body corporate though, just bodies. After they've secured a home, a lorikeet pair will mate for life, and generally raise a clutch of 2 birdie bubs per season. And who could forget that call, the alarm clock of a nation? Lorries sing early and often. Their trademark screech becomes a cacophony when the whole gang is hanging out in the blue gums. There's the stock standard chattering, the equivalent of polite dinner conversation. Then there's the warning call, which is the equivalent of
Mom, get in here, Mom!
Kaleidoscope cockerels are members of the genus Trichoglossus, which translates to hairy tongue. For reference, this is what a rainbow lorikeet tongue looks like. The hairy part is quite literal. It's tipped with filamentous papillae, which are extremely fine hairs. The elegant brush design of their slurper is perfectly adapted for tonguing nectar and pollen out of flowers. Their favourites are those of the eucalypt. In fact, their diet consists almost entirely of flowery secretions, save for the odd fruit, insect, or seed. They possess a shorter digestive tract than other parrot species, because like a diabetic with a death wish, they mainly consume sugar. Lorries have also been seen eating meat. This beef mince was left out for kookaburras, but our colourful comrades decided to forego veganism for a hot minute and indulge in some cold flesh. They don't actually enjoy it, they just want to make sure there's nothing left for other birds, to eliminate the competition. Some birds just want to see the world burn. Should you feed them seeds? Short answer, no. Unfortunately, feeding platforms are a perfect place for disease to spread from bird to bird. One fun example is necrotizing enteritis, a bacterial condition in which their own guts commit seppuku and start to rot from the inside. And that's not the worst one. Meet psittacine beak and feather disease. It triggers the keratin in birds to break down, resulting in deformed beaks and feather loss. Yeesh, the new season of The Flying Dead looks good. This disease is fatal, but infected birds won't display symptoms for months or even years. Beak and feather disease spreads through feces in close proximity, which means your bird feeder becomes a simultaneous buffet, toilet, and plague ship. Difference between that and your average KFC, sometimes the birds poo elsewhere. So please don't feed lorikeets from a bird feeder. I know you still want these colourful cuties visiting your yard, so plant flowers like grevilleas, bottle brushes, and even a eucalypt if you've got the room. These are their favourites, and you'll be enticing them in with their natural diet. Plus, plants are pretty cool too, right? Another mystery condition has been plaguing rainbow lorikeets in Queensland. The curious syndrome causes lories to become paralysed, and the afflicted parrots are unable to fly, swallow, or even blink. If the paralysis takes hold mid-flight, some are even lorieted out of the atmosphere. Without the help of wildlife vets and carers, they will die, being unable to feed themselves. The cause of this parrot polio is still unknown, but since it strikes seasonally, it's theorised that these lories are snacking on a toxic plant or fungus. It may be surprising to hear that our psychedelic sparrows aren't native to Tasmania or Western Australia. Both states consider them to be a feral species. It's hard to believe that a native animal could be a pest in other parts of the same continent, but from an ecological perspective, Perth might as well be in Alaska. They've also been introduced to New Zealand. Sorry, brew. Their introduction to WA is an interesting little historical tidbit. Fewer than 10 birds were brought over in the 1960s to be displayed in an aviary on Rottnest Island, but the lorries managed to escape their enclosure. Within the decade, they had become established, and now they number over 40,000 in the Perth region alone. Like a wave of multicoloured locusts, they've swept across the state, damaging local vineyards and fruit orchards. They're also outcompeting local parrot species, like the ringneck and western rosella in WA, and the critically endangered swift parrot in Tassie. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of
You won't believe how messed up this bird is.
Rainbow lorikeets are complex creatures, a mix of good and evil, all packaged up in a bag of hundreds and thousands. Their beauty is obvious, but gradually you come to admire their ambition and tenacity. These confetti conquistadors have colonised this continent, and you've got to admire the determination to survive. But it's not all blood and guts. Lories brighten up the day of anyone who has the pleasure of seeing them. I honestly wondered if there'd be enough to talk about on the topic of rainbow lorikeets. How wrong I was.